Welcome to Leadership, the Secret Sauce, the podcast where we talk to extraordinary coaches and leaders to dive into the realms of leadership and coaching. We're your hosts, Dave Lipsky and Matt Dodson. So let's jump in with another guest and find out their answer to the question, what is your secret sauce? All right, and welcome in. Before we begin, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Character Matters Coaching and Consulting, where they believe that your character is the compass guiding you through life's journey. Whether you're facing personal or professional challenges, they are dedicated to helping you discover and strengthen the core values that define who you are. Dave, who do we have on the podcast this?
I would like to welcome Mark and start off by asking a question. So Mark, on a scale from 1 to 10, what is your energy level? 1 low, 10 high.
Wow. 1 low, 10 high. I'm probably at an 8, but let me give you a little bit of context for that. Like, as someone with ADHD, if I'm at a 10, I'm pinging, and which usually means that my brain's working faster than my mouth, which is not probably ideal for a conversation like this. So I'm probably, 8.5, probably where I need to be in order to be fully engaged and not moving ahead too fast.
Yeah, no, eight's a nice level. I suffer from similar, and am privileged to have similar challenges.
Right, exactly.
So I always look at it as like a volume and a tone meter and a pace meter, and I'm turning it down from a 10 as much as is needed.
Right.
Matt, where are you on this fine morning?
Well, I'm probably 8.75. I'll probably talk way too much. So
8.75.
I would gladly embrace that. So
that's good. We'll take it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to need it because I'm at like a 7.5, Matt, and that's usually I'm a little bit higher. I think my daughter's coming in to visit today, and like my brain's in like 5 different places, but it's all good. I'm excited to have the conversation with Mark this morning. Mark, next question, is you're sitting on a plane, train, or automobile, and somebody next to you says, "Oh, hi. What do you do?" How do you answer that question?
Like a lot of your guests, right? It's so contextual, right? It really depends on the situation and where you're at. I mean, there's the short version, right? Which is I'm a leadership and organizational coach and consultant, which I think is kind of let's get it out there and see what happens. And then there's kind of the elongated version of that, which, I try to tie some kind of outcome to it. And it's usually it usually includes something around, I help leaders eliminate performance drag and, reach their goals as fast as possible. So then see what that provokes. And then we kind of move on from that conversation.
Do they ever ask what is performance drag?
They do almost every time, which is intentional.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And what do you say?
Really, it's a word that I've coined. It's a term that I've coined. And what it really represents is an attempt to articulate the gap between effort and results. And I look at it as there are certain causes that generally 3 that I kind of identify that slow leaders down or kind of prevent them from reaching their goals. And they generally center around strategic clarity or the lack thereof, leadership effectiveness, and how effective you are at executing and helping others execute. And then the last part is really around technology, tech literacy, and how well you are able to leverage technology to improve operational efficiency and productivity. And so by looking at those kind of 3 levers, and I have a diagnostic tool that I created for that it gives me a really good sense of kind of where the biggest points of drag are. Yeah. And then, how do we help them kind of diminish some of those or, eliminate it if you can, which I don't know that it's possible to eliminate all of it. And it kind of varies from person to person and even throughout, a year. There's just different things that impact leaders at different times and at different times in their careers. And habits and all those different things. And so it's a great way of just kind of saying and kind of demonstrating where you're at. So, the short answer to that would be, I really help leaders gain a lot more clarity and impact or increase their leadership effectiveness and leverage tools like AI to be more efficient and productive.
Yes. That's the buzzword. I think you got me at technology. Like, I would say most leaders would just be like, hey, that's an area I really need help in.
Yeah.
And
I
just
think
feel
it's
like it's
true.
passing me by. Like even in the coaching world where we have so much buzz about AI,
Right.
if a leader was to be honest, they would just say,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
weakness.
I just wrote a book. I just published a book about it about 5 weeks ago. And there's a whole section on it about AI and leadership. And
Yeah.
kind of it talks about this same exact situation. And interestingly enough, the reason it came about was as I kind of reconverted. I had been a nonprofit CEO for over a decade and was kind of transitioning into my own coaching practice again. And I consulted many years ago as we kind of relocated to Georgia. And through that process, you forget how much work it is to build a practice.
Yeah.
You have to build the website and, figure out all your processes again and your onboarding processes and your ideal clients, just all of those things that you kind of have to restart. And I could feel myself just kind of drowning at times. Like, just how do I don't have time to hardly work with people because I'm so busy trying to work in the business that I can't really do what I want to do. And so that's really when I started kind of playing around with AI and was like, okay, I feel like I'm getting behind. And to that point, I was facilitating a strategic planning session and they were just dropping words I'd never heard of. And I felt so outdated. And I was like, what's Zapier? And what's automation? And like, it kind of sneaks up on you. And so through that process, I just started kind of really digging in. And if Dave knows a little bit about the ADHD hyperfocus elements, you just start, learning, right? You dig in, and it's really been helpful for me. So now I kind of built, a couple chapters on that, just kind of explaining the importance of it and how leaders can kind of avoid getting into trouble and not, kind of going down the wrong rabbit holes, and how to kind of start and, just pick one or two ways to improve yourself and to improve your team. And then hopefully that improves efficiency and you create more time to focus on leadership and, and making sure that you're focusing on the right goals. So,
yeah. Marcus, if you had to say, what is your secret sauce? How would you describe that?
Yeah. One of the things I really like about your podcast is listening to this question from other people, because it's such a reflective and introspective question that we probably don't ask ourselves enough. And I really enjoy hearing kind of the different perspectives and learning about, how people arrive at their answer for this. Mm-hmm. For me, I think it is, when I think of a secret sauce, I think of something that's enhancing the main entree or complementing it. And in order to do that, I think you have to really, you have to have kind of a favorite entree. And what are the main ingredients of your entree first? And if the entree is leadership development, for me, I really think that there's, 3 important ingredients to that have to be considered. And those 3 ingredients to me are around leadership training, just having a library and a foundational understanding of skills and knowledge and frameworks that you can utilize when you need to, address challenges that you meet as a leader. I think the second part of that really is making sure that you have the right environment to play and explore and to apply this information and develop your own techniques. But oftentimes I think that's part of the problem. If you're scared to make a mistake, it's really difficult, I think, for some leaders to want to kind of get out of their comfort zone and try those things because they fear it leading to some kind of career limiting, event. And that's unfortunate. So I think you have to have that kind of environment in which you can kind of play around. And then I think the third part of that is coaching, is really having a space, a confidential, safe space that you can go and think and reflect and work through, some of your own problem solving and be challenged and be held accountable and not fear judgment or any of those things, some kind of punishment. And I think the 3 of those things really complement each other. And I think not having one of them or not having 2 of them really hinders your ability, I think, to grow as a leader. So to your question, what is my secret sauce? So, understanding that, at least from my belief system, I think my secret sauce is probably a combination of ingredients that stems from my academic background, which is I have 2 graduate degrees, one in management and leadership and another in organizational development, which I think complement each other very well. I've been an active adjunct for almost 20 years now, teaching both in undergrad and graduate classes in business and management and leadership and organizational behavior. So I've got a mix of those types of backgrounds and experience teaching. Been consulting for almost 20 years, wide range of leadership experience at various levels, including serving as a nonprofit CEO for over a decade. And then being a certified executive coach. And I think part of that mix is the ability to be with a client and help diagnose what they may really need. And sometimes it's training, and sometimes it's advising, and sometimes it's coaching, and being able to take off those hats, which is not always easy to do, but intentionally be able to develop a plan for that individual to help them get better, which is why they're there. And so I think it's kind of the combination of that and the ability to mix and match, modify the sauce for what they need when they become the main entree. So,
yeah. What would you also just kind of drill into that when you think about that, like being, I pulled out being with a client is what I heard you talk about, but like,
yeah.
How did you know that being with the client is really what sort of led you to your secret sauce?
Yeah, that's a good question. It probably stems, it stems from a long period of time. And it probably stems from first recognizing your own weaknesses, right? So, when I kind of talk about these 3 performance drags, I would say that, I didn't really know I didn't really know that would help other people. I knew, when I went back to get my second graduate degree, it was really because I'd been in that, that CEO role for a while, and I could just feel like there's things I knew I just didn't know. There's just blind spots, and I wasn't able to get to where I wanted to as fast as I wanted to. And so that kind of led me to say, okay, well, I've got this management and leadership degree. I'm just missing something. And it was really a lot of the systems and processes, I think, that really kind of helped me, just the way that my brain works, that brought a lot of it together. And so that forced me to kind of start taking a step back and saying, okay, well, am I being ADHD and running all over the place and being a firefighter and putting out a bunch of stuff and not really focused on, maintaining, what my own goals are. And so it kind of started with that. And then I think it kind of started with, then that kind of evolved into how effective am I as a leader? Am I a leader that people would want to follow? How do I improve execution? And then that kind of evolved into, at the time, this organization had very old processes. Everything was paper drawn, no software, like it was just, nothing was written down. And so that kind of element was like, okay, we got to leverage some technology because I don't have time to do this and this and this. And so if we can free this up, then that gives me more time to focus on that. So that whole kind of combination for me then kind of became a framework that I started using with other leaders within my own organization, right? How clear are they on our goals? How clear are they on their responsibilities? Are they getting overburdened? Am I overburdening them? How effective are they as leaders? What can I do to invest in them to help them become better leaders? Are they leveraging technology? Are they stuck in their old ways? And what do I need to do as a leader to help facilitate that? And then that kind of evolved into how do I help other clients? And so over time, it kind of evolved into what I call the mammoth performance cycle, because it's just a continual process that leads to big results. And so that's kind of where the branding came from. But I think, it's kind of that framework that evolved out of those ingredients of the secret sauce, and I don't know that I really recognized it really until a couple of years ago. I didn't really know what I was doing those same things, but it wasn't as conscious as it is now for sure. Enough to build a diagnostic tool that says, hey, let's figure this out fast. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, it certainly, I hear it like, this is one of the reasons why we have our podcast is because Dave and I like to spend time with other coaches.
Yeah.
But more importantly than just spending time with other coaches where we feel like, some personal resonance, but we want to know like your story, like how did you get here? Because that's the most interesting thing. And I think it's the thing that our listeners relate to that are not coaches.
Right.
Like, how did you, so let me just ask this next question.
Sure.
How would you see those three things in your coaching? I'm coming to you. You're now my coach. Not just my first experience. Like, how am I going to see those things? You're going to throw tools at me. What do I get? What am I going to experience?
Yeah. In terms of a process, to me, it all starts with, I call it the modern leadership scorecard. I have everyone take it. Because it gives me insight into what questions I want to ask you when we have our first kind of discovery session, and or if we think we're going to be a good fit for each other. And so I typically use that as a gauge and a barometer to start a conversation. And I ask about those three areas. Like, I'll have a pretty in-depth conversation around strategic clarity. And it's interesting to see you kind of provoke those conversations, and, you kind of use your coaching skills to kind of see where they go with that. And that uncovers some things. So that goes down on the list of some things we might want to tackle. And then I usually, ask about some leadership effectiveness, or ask some questions about some of the things that may have popped up on the scorecard, and kind of identify or ask them what their priorities are in terms of what would help them achieve their goals in whatever time frame we're working in. Usually I kind of set it for 6 months to kind of start. And so that gets their brain saying, okay, what do I want to accomplish in 6 months? And what leadership skills do I think I need to develop in order to make that happen? And then the third piece is I always add in the tech piece, because I think if we can get them thinking this way, it frees up more time for them to spend the time on what they need to be doing, and not running around putting out fires and getting distracted. And so from those discussions, I like to build kind of a development plan. And it includes a certain number of sessions, but those sessions have intentional purposes. It may be we're going to talk about, this is a training. These are 2 frameworks we're going to learn. We're going to spend some time talking about those. And when we have those training sessions, they're only on the training. And then when we have kind of the coaching sessions, they're usually more of a blend between kind of what 2 goals you kind of said you wanted to focus on, and anything else that kind of pops up. And it makes it a lot easier, I think, to kind of combine those 2 things, because it's part of the process already. And so it's kind of a blend of those 2 things. And sometimes they overlap, but I think because of my teaching background as well, and having worked in a lot of graduate programs, I've been shocked at how limited a lot of the knowledge and education is for some of these, grad students. And some have been in the workforce for a long time, and they just don't have a lot of models, or they've been exposed to them, but they weren't really reinforced, or they were overly complicated. And so they don't ever really use them. They don't ever really kind of adapt and learn. And so I usually find 1 or 2 things that I really want to help them, tools that they can start using. And then that becomes part of our conversation too, about how are you utilizing it, so I can reinforce the development of that as well. So it's kind of a 3-prong attack on purpose. I want them to feel like they're making progress in those 3 areas. And typically I would say they do. And then it's a kind of a cycle. Like I said, I think we all kind of go, okay, now what do we need to work on, and what's the most pressing issues? And I find that is, it's, this whole conversation is kind of interconnected to me. So, and in my approach.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like what you said about the training and then the mixing, the coaching in, and I'm wondering, like, what's an example of where, there's a body of knowledge that leaders are just not using, right? And they might have been exposed to it, but they haven't been able to implement it. What's a typical example that you're finding that you have to bridge?
Well, it's interesting enough. It's pretty diverse, because I think in our leadership journeys, we all hit, you may have been exposed to change models, but not been in change, at the time that you had it, or you may have had some experience in conflict, but now, you're in an shitstorm, right? Like, I think that's there's a disconnect. It's not happening when you're exposed to it. And so I think a lot of that is kind of identifying what kind of background they have or what they've heard, and how can I kind of reintroduce that to them and provide some training and some education or some re-education on those areas. And then when we're talking about, whatever situation they're wanting to bring to the table in our coaching sessions, it's easy to kind of say, well, have you used that? Have you been using that? Where have you tried that? Where did you feel like you had some success? What do you think is not working well? Then you're kind of provoking them, and they know that you're going to push some of those buttons. And I think it makes them more conscious of it. And I think because it's a coaching session, it feels like you're not judging them. You're encouraging them to play and to have this place to have the conversation. And so, and then of course, there's always the things that they want to talk about. I mean, that's part of the session, but I think incorporating a couple of these things, I think is very helpful as well. And I think it kind of creates the climate or the environment that I want, which is, how do we reinforce the utilization of some of these things? And so that right or wrong, good or bad, so that you start using them more often and they become a real tool for you. I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, that's really helpful. I'm one follow-on question to that is, Marcus, I really appreciate your eclectic background of like experiencing things in multiple places, and then how you bring that by wearing multiple hats. And I'm kind of thinking, I'm picturing myself being on the other side, being your client, and you switching hats. Like, how would I experience you being the coach, being the advisor, being the educator?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is in succession. So I think early on, it's kind of about diagnostics, right? It's kind of like, here's what we found. Let's kind of sit down and have a conversation about what your objectives are, what your learning objectives are, what your result objectives are from this. Because most of those clients come with a different opinion or definition of what coaching is, right? Some of them think, it's business coaching. Some of them think that it's a punishment. Some of them think that, it's because they're lacking in something, and that, this is some sort of way of trying to catch them up, and they have their own opinion. Some know that it's actually coaching if they've had coaching before. So I think part of it is kind of not redefining that, but saying, look, this is, I look at all those things as coaching, if we want to call them coaching, but they have different intentions. So early on, I think a lot of it's about diagnostic and kind of saying, these are the things that we're going to do. And I think it's really important to separate those sessions out. If they're training sessions, I think you frame it as a training session. Look, I want to spend some time talking about this. I'm going to be talking to you, right? I want you to have questions. Let's go back and forth. But it's really important that I think it's really important for you to understand these concepts, so that when you go back into your team, that you are able to start applying them and utilizing them. And then when you're having the coaching sessions, it's much more about what was your experience like. And having to be really disciplined about putting your teaching hat on, taking it off and being, much more there for them. But I think when you structure them that way, and I like to alternate them, and sometimes there's a little bit of overlap, but I really try to stay pretty pure to the intention. And like I said before, I think the strategic elements are really easy to work into the coaching because they're already, it's their strategic objectives. So it's easy to kind of say, where are we at on that? And then what else do you want to talk about? And then that way I'm kind of helping them keep on track for those, 2 or 3 strategic objectives that they really want to make progress on. And I think it creates a framework for them when they come to sessions. They either know we're going to be working on some training today, or we're going to be talking about my objectives and how it's going and what, how I can get better. So I think it helps them when they understand kind of what's coming to and the type of session it's going to be. So,
Marcus, if we put the coach hat on somebody else, what do you want from that coach?
I think a lot of coaches we want what we're trying to, develop for people. I think for me, I really didn't know much about coaching until I didn't have a coach when I was serving as as an executive director. And so I don't think I really even understood the benefit myself. And so I got out and said, hey, I want to go maybe I want to get my coaching, certification. And started, then you start having a coach and going through these sessions. You're like, oh my gosh, what have I been missing? Like it's just such a part of the puzzle that you don't know if you don't know. It's like not it's other training. You just don't know if you haven't been exposed to it. And so I think for me, it was kind of an additive thing. Like I want to work with someone who can say, hey, here's some areas that I think you have to develop, because I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what other models are out there. I don't know what other tools there are that I could potentially be using. And so I would want someone to be able to articulate that to me, or at least refer me to some place that can articulate that to me. It doesn't have to be the same person, so that I can work on those things. But also, have someone who can, I'm a pretty direct person, so I want someone to be pretty direct with me. I want them to give them my space. I want to feel comfortable, but I want them to also help hold me accountable. I'm a talker and I can get off on things. So I want someone to keep kind of corralling me back to what our objective is a little bit, but at the same time, give me some free reign a little bit. But, I think I would want a coach that kind of has a little bit of all those skills. And sometimes I think we each need each of those types of things, and so that's how I think I kind of developed into this approach. But I completely understand the benefit and value of just having a coach, and not every coach has those same skill sets and backgrounds. And so I don't know, you don't want someone providing training who doesn't know what they're talking about. That doesn't serve anybody, well either. So I don't know how unusual my approach is. I haven't found a lot of, people that kind of talk about it the same way. But I think either it's a combination coaches or it's one coach. I would kind of want both of those types of discussions. I think are really beneficial for leaders.
Yeah. How about what would you recommend in order to kind of, okay, so I'm whether I'm going to be your new coachee.
Yeah.
What would you, or even somebody that you want to talk about coaching, what would you recommend them read or watch or listen to? Or
yeah, I kind of look at that question in a couple different ways, and so let me make sure I'm kind of understanding it. There's people that I go back and read that I encourage people to read.
Yeah, what's that?
Yeah, it's kind of an eclectic mix, as you can imagine. I'm early on, I was exposed to Peter Drucker. So I read a lot of Drucker and had a lot of influence by John Maxwell early on in my career. So those were just kind of the first two people. But over time, it's kind of evolved. When I got into OD, Kurt Lewin, I spent a lot, I was really influenced by the simplicity of Kurt Lewin and John Maxwell for that matter. And so that really, I found that I would use things that I could remember. So the more simplistic it was, the easier it was to recall. And then it was just much more easier to use. So I'd say, those three people, and then you throw in a little Simon Sinek and maybe a little Angela Duckworth for grit. And then, I don't know how much of the business world like a little bit of Alex Hormozi, which is kind of the business side of things. He's kind of modern, but it's the simplicity of articulating approaches to business or what else that I really appreciate. And so all of those people I think are beneficial for different reasons, but they kind of all fit within my framework, in the way that I coach. In terms of resources that this is maybe where I plug a little bit. I think the diagnostic tool, it's so fast. It's 21 questions. It takes you 3 minutes. It's meant just to provoke your initial response to 7 questions in each of those 3 categories. And then it gives you feedback and says, hey, here's your score in each of these. And then here's things you can do. Like, you don't need to call me to do it. It's about awareness. And I think it's a super easy tool to use. And if nothing else, it provokes thought. And, and that's so much, I think oftentimes just what we need is just a little kind of kick to say, all right, let's look at that. And maybe I do need to spend more time on the AI stuff because I couldn't answer 4 of those questions. Right. So I think that's an important part of it. The book that I wrote, I think is also very different. I've read a lot of books through the years, and a lot of them are very motivational and some of them are practical. But I find a lot of them are based on all successes. And most of my book starts off with an oh shit moment. Here's where I learned so much from my mistakes. And I don't know that leaders, we talk enough about those mistakes so that other people can learn about them, because we're embarrassed, we don't want to know. And even writing that book was difficult because there's things in there that I told stories. The good part of the story, I didn't tell what the consequence of some of those stories were to other people, and getting them out on paper and then kind of using those as a way to even look back on myself and say, wow, I didn't realize how much that really impacted my leadership approach. Was really beneficial. But then the second half of that, and again, that book kind of focuses on those three areas: strategic clarity and leadership effectiveness, and then incorporating AI and leveraging it into your daily use. But there's, what was I going to say with that book was really designed to be kind of a Swiss Army knife, so there's like 20 frameworks in there, and I put them at the very end. Well, they're built in, but there's like a resource guide at the end, because I got so tired of trying to find things myself, right? Of just like, what was that model? What was it called? And there's no just one place to find them unless you're going to go grab some textbook, which nobody wants to do. So I think it's a great resource. It's been getting very good reviews, but it's built to be something that you use, you don't memorize, and you go, okay, I'm having this situation. Okay, what was that? Okay, that's a simple framework. Let's prepare for this situation or this conversation, or, and that's what the intention of it was and is. So, that's a resource that I definitely am encouraging people, to get. And right now I've got it, because I'm using it for my classes too. I think it's $2.99. So it's like, it's nothing. Go get it.
What's the title, and where could someone find it?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's called Mammoth Success, A Practical Guide to Strategic Clarity, Leadership Growth, and AI-Driven Productivity. So it covers those three sections.
And what would be the best way someone's listening and like, this is really fascinating, or I want to take it. What's the best way someone could get a hold of you, Marcus?
To get a hold of me personally?
Yeah.
Probably one of two ways. Either on my website, it's mammothdevelopment.com, or LinkedIn. I'd say LinkedIn is probably the easiest to get a hold of me directly. Like most of us, I think it's just, without giving out my cell phone number, that's the easiest way.
That's good. Dave, what's your reflection?
One, I so appreciate your eclectic background, and kind of as we talk to you, one of the things that keeps coming through is like how much experience is our teacher, and whether you consciously create a portfolio of experiences and learn from that and actually use that as a tool to teach from. And I really appreciate that. And I think I don't think coaches always think that that's part of their development and role to do that.
Right.
But I so clearly see that kind of helped you build who you are.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I do think it's part of it. I really do. And so much of this came from my own kind of OSMs, right? Like, you're like, what was that? Like, where does that? And so I didn't write the book part, but I started kind of creating my own resource guide to find things. And I realized that even some of my early clients, they're like, how do you remember that? I'm like, well, I guess it's because I teach it all the time is the only reason I remember it. And that was kind of a huge, wake up call for me too, is like, we're not going to remember these things. We have to figure out a way to have them accessible and not so overly complicated that we can't remember how to use them. And I think a lot of academia takes a little bit too much time to make things as complicated as possible, to make it sound as fancy as possible. And we need the opposite as leaders. We don't have time for that complexity. We need easy solutions that help us, solve problems. So I think a lot of that really has influenced, my approach, and I appreciate you saying that. So
yeah, I think also just Dave, for mine would be is one of the things I heard you say, Marcus, and you didn't call it this, but this is how I would call it: the addressing of AI or technology in a coaching conversation, to me, is addressing a shadow or a fear that I have as a leader.
Absolutely.
That I am not talking about, or why am I going to bring that up? Like, but it is like, it's eating my lunch when I'm going to the meeting and people are using AI regularly. And so I think that was my biggest reflection. I got the same one on reflecting on your mistakes. I hear that, and I see that you've experienced like that's a regular part of your practice. But addressing the shadow of AI, or whether it's the living under the shadow of that shoe in some way. Yeah.
Well, and again, I really think that AI is a critical leadership skill. Yeah. I mean, I think to think of it anything less than that, you're going to be behind. And I don't think AI is going to replace leaders, but I think leaders who understand AI are going to replace leaders who don't. And so we have to spend some time, I think, talking about it and promoting it and helping people, as a coach or as a client of a coach, I think, it's worthwhile to have both parties engaged in looking at how it can improve our skills or improve our work. And, if I'm assuming you guys have your own practices as well, based on the conversations that I've heard, it's, for me, the reality of creating more time for me to do what I really want to do. That's all the real incentive you need, because who wants to be working on their website all the time? Or who wants to be working on, contract part all the time? And you can put some of that stuff just into AI and say, hey, give me 3 examples of this, of a contract for blah, 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 blah. And it spits it out. And you're like, okay, well, I like this. I don't like this. My attorney, is this okay? Am I not okay? Like, I think there's a lot of benefit and a lot of utilizations that you can do to help you free up time. And spend more time thinking about your clients instead of that stuff. So,
yeah, there's just a very interesting adoption versus adaption thing that I heard, right? It's like, adopt the AI, but how are you adapting your leadership? Which you're making me think a little differently, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, it's both for sure.
So I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's really been a pleasure to meet you and learn more about you. And I also want to give a shout out to our sponsor. So, are you feeling stuck or overwhelmed? Character Matters Coaching and Consulting provides leadership coaching and consulting to empower you to overcome obstacles and reach your full potential. Visit charactermatterscoaching.com to learn more about their transformative coaching and how to get connected to Matt for your organization. Thank you so much, Marcus.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to chat with you, and I look forward to listening to your podcast in the future.
Thanks, Marcus. All
Thanks,
right.
guys.
Have a great day. Thanks for listening. If you love this podcast, please share it with another coach or leader. Make sure you go to the show notes to get all the resources from today's episode.